Well, welcome to Chapter 5. This week is all about the time value of money. So it's very much numbers based this week. There are definitely concepts within the time value of money we have to understand. But we're going to talk about present value, future value, what an annuity is, and solving for an interest rate, and solving for N, which is the number of periods, number of years over a series of payments. The best way to understand time value of money is usually visually. And so we have a timeline on the screen. And whenever you see one, always think that 0 is today. And then we have 1, 2, 3, which could be a period of a year, a month, or whatever you want it to be. So just think 0, 1 month or 1 year, 2 months or 2 years, whatever it is. And that starts your next series of payments. So cash flow, 0, 1, 2, 3, and whatever the interest rate is. So for example, what we could figure out with some timelines is in 2 years, I need to pay somebody $100. And so the timeline, you can see 0 is today, some interest rate, then 1, then 2. So with time value of money, what that means is I would not need to have $100 today to pay somebody in 2 years from now. I could have an amount less than that invested at some interest rate that would grow into $100 when it matures in 2 years. And then we have what they call an annuity at the bottom. And whenever you see the word annuity, just think that's a series of regular payments that don't change. To be an annuity, the dollar amount has to be the same every time period. This is what we call an uneven cash flow stream. You can see that every year is a different amount. When you see the negative, that means in time 0, I had to spend $50,000 or $50. That much left my business. But in the future, then I'm going to receive these future positive amounts. And we'll use those types of cash flow streams in a future chapter. So this is kind of just warming us up to that. So now we can start to begin to calculate these and do a little bit of number crunching. And it says, what's the future value of an initial $100 after 3 years if the interest rate per year is 4%? So just imagine you have $100 and you put it in the bank. And the bank says every year you keep this money with us, we will give you 4%. And at the end of 3 years, you can take the money out along with the principal of $100 plus whatever interest that you have earned. Okay, so a very common type of an issue. Think of a certificate of deposit being something kind of like this. Okay, so there's lots of ways to calculate this and figure it out. And they're going to start by showing us what they call the step-by-step approach. And I'm really just showing this to you so you can kind of see the mechanics of how this works. So in 1 year, just think $100. 0.04 is $4. So we just multiply in year 1, $100 principal times 1.04, you may have $104. So at the end of 1 year, that principal of 100 has earned interest of $4, and the value of our account, of our investment, is worth 104. And then in 2 years, kind of think how that works then. Our $104 is sitting there for another year, and it's going to earn interest on the interest. So in year 2, notice that we earn 108.16 because I earned another $4 on the $100 principal, but I earned an extra 16 cents because of that extra $4 of interest for that second year. So I earned interest on my interest, which is the 108.16. And the same thing for year 3. I earned another $4 on the initial $100 principal, but now I've got this 816 sitting there for another year. I earn interest on that. So that's how that works. So every year we keep the investment, we're earning interest on our interest called compounding. Okay, so that's kind of just the step-by-step approach. And the formula to solve for this future value of N, just any number of years or number of periods, is the present value multiplied by 1 plus I, the interest rate, to the power of N, the number of years. Okay, so that's the formula right there. This is a formula just to be aware of. We're going to use an approach where you don't have to have the formula memorized to solve for this, but if you at least know what the components of the formula are, that will help you to solve future problems that I will give you. And then the other ways to calculate these, besides the step-by-step approach, which I just showed you because I just want you to kind of see the mechanics, in reality, everyone will use one of two methods, either a financial calculator or an app on your smartphone that will do financial calculations, which is probably more common, or Excel. And I'm a big Excel user in the corporate world where my background was. I used Excel frequently because I had to give information that I did, had to support journal entries and things that had to be audited. So I had to give my documentation to internal and external auditors to support work and journal entries that I did. And so I did all my work in Excel. So that's kind of just where I just found that this to be the most useful. The nice thing about Excel is, you can show your inputs, you can show the output, you can save it, you can save the number, you can save the file, give that to somebody else. So the inputs are the same if you use Excel or if you use a financial calculator. And you can see here, okay, I'm back. I had a little technical issue there. Sorry about that. But what you can see are the inputs and the number of years, interest rate per year, the present value, the PMT stands for payment, and the future value. And I get that same amount of 112.49. Just want everybody to kind of see the inputs and how it turns into an output. Then in Excel, you have a formula called FV, and it has the same inputs. I'll show you an Excel file in a bit that will explain that. And then here is kind of the same thing. It says for present value, let's look at a timeline and say, in 3 years, I need $100. Okay, so what's the present value of that amount today? So going backwards to 3 years at 4%. Okay, so that's called discounting, the reverse of compounding. So future value is compounding, present value is discounting. So they go in opposite directions. And the formula for present value has all the same inputs that the future value formula had, but reorganized in a different way. Okay, so now we're taking present value as future value divided by 1 plus I, the interest rate to the power of n. So after I solve for this, the answer is 88.90. And what that means is if I have 88.90 today, I invest that at 4% for 3 years. By the end of year 3, that will be worth $100. So it works the same way as the previous calculation for future value. All the same buttons. We just solved for the last one. If you're using a financial calculator, you put in all your inputs that you know, then the last button you push on your calculator is the answer, the one you're solving for. So I would enter the N3, interest rate of 4, payment of 0, future value of 100, and then the last key I'd hit would be the PV key, and that spit out the 88.90 as the present value of all that. Or in Excel, instead of having the FV formula, I now have the PV formula with all the same inputs. Just this FV right here is what's different. If I have the FV formula, this would say PV over on the right. Okay, then also just kind of keep in mind, with all the various inputs, as long as I know every other input, I can solve for what I don't know. So maybe the question is, I need to solve for some interest rate. I need $119 in year 3. So I've got $100 today. I need that to grow to $119.10 in 3 years. At what interest rate do I need to invest that for that amount to grow to the required amount? Okay, so that's what this is showing me right here. So I'm solving for the interest rate. So if I have $100 invested at 6% today, and it sits there for 3 years, I'll have $119.10 at the end of 3 years. And so then in Excel, I use the rate formula. And again, all of the various inputs are still there. I just use the rate formula instead of either FV or PV. And then same thing with solving for N. The number of periods, and the question here is sales grow at 10% per year, how long before sales will double? So the nice thing about this one, it doesn't really matter what dollar amount doubles, and they're using the present value of $1, future value of $2, and we're looking at 10% interest, or 10% growth, which is our interest rate essentially, and the answer is 7.3. In Excel, it's called the number of periods formula, NPER. And I use the rate, the payment, present value, future value, the type. And sometimes those are zeros, right? The payment is a zero in this example. So any amount, $1 to $2, it could have been 5 to 10, we get the same answer. Any amount will double if it grows by 10% in 7.3 years. So just over 7 years, our sales will have doubled at a growth rate of 10% per year. Okay. So earlier I talked about that an annuity is a series of equal payments. Every dollar amount has to be the same for this to be an annuity. And now we have two types of annuities, what they call ordinary and due. It's very important that you know the difference between both of them, because you will get several questions in your homework about each, and you have to recognize the difference between them. Sometimes the problem will tell you this is ordinary or this is due. Sometimes the problem will just say the payment happens at the end of the period or the payment happens at the beginning of the period. And end or beginning are clues about what type of annuity this is. So whenever you see ordinary annuity, the payment happens at the end of the year. Okay. When you see annuity due, the payment happens at the beginning of the year. And that's a key distinction between the two. So ordinary annuity, today is time zero. And we have some interest rate, and then we have the payment at the end of the period, end of the period, end of the period. For annuity due at time zero, the first payment happens, and then a year later, then 2 years later. There's still 3 payments. The timing matters, though. Imagine that you receive money sooner rather than later. You can invest that. You can do something with that. So annuity dues always have a higher value than ordinary annuities when everything else is equal in terms of the number of years, the dollar amounts, and the interest rate. So to solve for those, same formulas, either the FV or the PV formulas. The difference, though, is now I have this payment. So an annuity has a series of equal payments. That's the difference. Okay. Now in Excel, there's something that says type right here, and that type is either a 0 or a 1. If that type is a 0, that's Excel code for this is an ordinary annuity. If that is a 1, that's Excel code for that is an annuity due. Okay, so they're doing the same thing here. They're doing future value of that dollar stream. They're doing present value of that dollar stream. Okay, so that gets kind of both answers there. And then they do the same thing for the due. If you're using a financial calculator, it'll have a begin mode on it somewhere. There's a button that will say begin, and hitting that begin button tells the calculator that this is an annuity due. In Excel, it's either the 0 or the 1. Okay, so down here is the 1 under type for Excel, but otherwise all the inputs are the same. It's just that begin is the difference, or the 1 in Excel. I'm doing the future value and present value of that. Okay, so now we're saying another calculation here. What's the present value of a 5-year ordinary annuity? $100 at 4%. And the key here is I have to, if I'm using a financial calculator, I have to get it off the begin mode. I have to make sure I physically hit the end key if I am doing that, or else I'll have the wrong answer. So if you're using a financial calculator, just really be careful about begin versus end mode. I'm going to show you some Excel stuff. That's my preferred way of doing this. And there's giving us some different examples here of different calculations, different time periods, 10 year, 25 years. All the other inputs are the same. And this one, I just notice how the difference in dollars of what this is worth. Present value here is 811. Here it's 1562. And the bottom one, perpetuity. If you've never heard that term, that just means forever. So basically, what that says is I'm going to get a $100 payment forever. As long as I am aware of. So I just take the payment of $100. Divided by 4%, and the perpetuity present value is $2,500. That's actually common for preferred stocks. We have not gotten to the stock question yet, obviously, but when that comes up, that will be something that we'll take a look at. Okay, so next then is the power of compound interest. I really like this one because it kind of shows you the power of savings and the importance of savings. So it says here a 20-year-old student wants to save $5 a day for her retirement. Every day she places $5 in a drawer. At the end of the year, she invests all that money. So 365 times $5, it's $1,825, and she puts that in an account that will earn 8%. And so a brokerage account, just think she's invested that in the stock market, and she expects to get 8% on that. The average over the next 45 years, because she's at age 20. She's going to let that sit until she's 65. And so how much will that be worth? So $1,825 for 45 years. So you need to solve for the future value. So if she begins saving today, how much will she have when she's 65? You can see here, so that one amount, that one lump sum of $1,825 just sitting there will turn into, and she's making, I apologize, I should say she's making that payment every year. So basically her savings is she'll put in $1,825 per year for 45 years. Let me say that right. And so that will turn into $705,373. Okay, so just putting in $1,825 per year for 45 years turns into just over $700,000. Okay. So then they're going to compare that to somebody else. So now somebody else doesn't start that same plan until later in life, let's say at age 40. So now there's 25 years until completion of, until retirement. And that is a much smaller number. I want you guys to see that. So 25 years, 8% per year. The payment annually is $1,825. You end up at $133,418. So a huge difference between the two. And so then the question is, how much does that 40-year-old need to kick in per year to catch up? Basically to catch up to the 20-year-old who started saving 20 years prior. And so we can solve for the payment now. So we're going to solve for the PMT, and you can see how we do that. That's kind of the last key that we enter. So you only have 25 years to catch up, 8% to get that 705. So you have to put in more, 9,648 per year to get there. So I'm going to stop right there, and we'll come back and do this in two sections.